What's up? I'm coming at you today with a February wrap up of all of the books that I read. Um, I figured I'd start doing these on this channel because, while I cover a lot in the wrap ups every year, like I cover like 5 every year, like my top 5, I did want to cover, um, I do want to put you guys on to some good titles that you wouldn't otherwise know about if I wasn't doing these. And that's one of the things that I don't like about doing the top 5 every year without doing the wrap-ups every month or every other month, is you guys don't really get to see what I'm reading throughout the year. And if the titles that I'm reading throughout the year would interest you more than just my top 5. So I'm going to start doing this. I'm doing this specifically because I read 6 books in February, and that's a lot for me. That has to do with the fact that I played these while working on paintings. And I also was trying to finish up reading the books that I was interested on Audible. And so I read a lot in February, and I went through a lot, and this month I have a feeling it's going to be a really good reading month for me as well. Probably comparable. It's probably going to end up being 6 books that I read this month too. Currently, I'm ahead, 1 book ahead on my Goodreads goal, which I set for 40 this year. I've read 9 out of the 40. I'm almost at 10. My current read right now is, I just finished Michael Malice's Anarchist book, and then I'm reading this book on M19, the female T group. I can't even say the word because I'll just get knocked off here. But anyway, the book is by William Rosenow, if you want to know what I'm reading, and you'll be able to figure it out. It has to do with the Capitol. But anyway, I just started, so I don't really know. It's narrated by the same woman that she did not write it. That narrated Michelle McNamara's audiobook, and I like her voice, and I'm actually going to go through here and look at what other books that she's narrated, because I don't mind her voice at all. Her name is Gabra Zachman, and like I said, I'm not that far into this book, but it sounds like it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of other books that I have favorited here on my Hoopla here. That's what I use to listen to audiobooks. They are extremely, there's so many titles that I don't even know what to pick from. Like, I've got so many political books here, more than I would usually read. Like, I would say I've been reading more nonfiction than ever, because in this format, it's just like listening to a podcast. There's one about Lori Vallow that I want to listen to, Roanoke, trafficking. There's so many political books here that I don't even know where to begin. And then there's so many true crime stories, so many thrillers, so many dystopians. It's honestly overwhelming. But I have a feeling that this month is going to be an amazing reading month as well. But I wanted to cover these because February was not only a good reading month for me, being that I read more than I usually do in that month, and I'd gotten ahead of what my goal was on Goodreads, but these books that I read in February were really good. So I'm going to list them off for you here. And so I'm going to start now. So the first one that I read in the month of February, which was actually the second book I read this year, was called In the Name of the Children by Jeff Reinick. It was a story about children. He's an FBI guy, ex-FBI guy, and basically this whole book is about his journey to getting into the FBI and his journey into this particular section of the FBI and why and how he got there. He details personal experiences in his own life that influenced why he wanted to be there and what made him end up there and why he's so passionate about these cases and these children. A lot of the book discusses some really disturbing material, so this is not, this is kind of like the whole John Wayne Gacy thing. If you couldn't stomach that book, you won't be able to stomach this one either. And that goes for the next book as well, which is extremely disturbing. But this book is about child abductions. Some of them are child murders. Some of them are just really, really terrible cases. And I really like the way in which this book was written. I gave it 5 stars out of 5 stars. It was good. I thought he wrote it really well, and it reminded me of the read that one of the reads one of the books that I read last year that was called The Cases That Haunt Us by John E. Douglas and Mark Olshaker. He was an ex-FBI agent too, I believe, and he was like a profile, like analysis guy. In other words, he would like put together the profiles of the personality traits and the physical traits and everything of these killers and rapists and all this other stuff. So this book was similar to that, and I actually preferred this one better. And it was a really interesting story. So that was that. The second book I read in the month of February was called Death of an Altar Boy. Now, if you remember, this year I had put the movie Spotlight in my top 16 movies that I watched in the year 2021. If you wanted a continuation of that story, this book is literally made for you. I'm so glad that I watched Spotlight before I read this. I think doing it that way makes more sense because then you kind of get the basis and a kind of base level understanding. You know, some people will tell you, read the book first and then watch the movie. But this book, that movie was not based on this book. What I'm saying to you is to get a base level understanding of the Catholic Church and the corruption in the 80s and the 90s and even in the 70s and even before then. To get a base level understanding of what Boston specifically looked like during those times, I would watch the movie first and then watch this, and read this, and then your mind is going to be literally blown. This case, I'm going to cover on my podcast channel. I'm going to do a part 2 of the problem with the Catholic Church, and I'm going to do a part 2 because that's how disturbing this case is, and I don't hear anyone talking about this case. This case was specific was extremely tragic, and literally just shows you how the Catholic Church gets away with literal murder. And it's not even metaphorical. It's literally, go read this book and you'll understand what I'm saying. This was something that I was completely unaware of. The reason why I tell you to go watch Spotlight first is because they mention Boston and specifically Massachusetts a lot. They also mention Cape Cod. They mention this book is basically Massachusetts centered. Doesn't mean that this doesn't go on everywhere, as R.J. Fleming mentions in this book, who's the author. As he mentions in the book, this goes on everywhere. And at the end of the movie Spotlight, they also tell you how many places this goes on. And that's just a list of what they had discovered. It's not even like an in-depth church by church thing. It's not even like, it's way broader than what we even understand. This book was completely eye-opening, and it's a total, just what I would recommend is people watch Spotlight first and then read this second. And that's basically more than a beginner's course on the corruption inside the Catholic Church. And even for me, it was eye-opening as someone that has looked into certain things over the years, and this was eye-opening to me. And it's definitely a beginner's, this is definitely something that I would recommend people that don't understand the corruption inside of it to read. I listened to the audiobook of it, and it was extremely informative. And sometimes when you're reading the audiobook, the story can kind of get away from you sometimes. But what I notice is with nonfiction, that doesn't really happen. And especially this type of nonfiction in which you're really engaged in the story and invested in these human lives, that really is difficult to do. I gave it also a 5 out of 5 stars. It was an amazing read, and I can see this basically, possibly, it's almost a guaranteed spot in my top 5 for this year. And it's literally the third book I read this year, but it's got basically a guaranteed spot. Nerve by Jeanne Ryan. I had read this year. I had watched the movie like about a year or so ago, and I knew it was a book, and the book was available, so I was curious to see the differences. Oh my gosh, guys, like when I tell you that, first of all, okay, for those of you who say you must read the book before you watch the movie, I've done it opposite many times, and I actually still am able to make the universe up in my mind, and still able to enjoy it. And in fact, I would say sometimes I enjoy it more once I realize how shitty the movie is. And this was one of those cases, guys. Like, I'm not, like, I rewatched the movie after reading this, but I was, like, when I first watched Nerve, I was like, oh, it's kind of a cool movie or whatever. Reading this book, it was so much better. This book was so much better. It was so much more detailed. The characters were so much more detailed. The story was so much more detailed. The risk factor was 10 times the amount that was in the movie. And I just enjoyed the book way more. And I actually think after watching the movie is not only like totally cheesy, and it's not even what the story is, guys. Like, I'm telling you, if you read this book, you're gonna understand what I'm saying. Like, the movie is nothing like the book. Like, literally nothing. If you've watched the movie and you think, oh well, I've watched the movie, I don't need to read the book, I would say read the book, because the book is a really good read, y'all, and it's got a lot more detail, and it's a lot more thrilling. What I'll compare this book and the movie to It's it reminds me of, hear me out now, it reminds me of if The Purge and the Escape Room movies had a baby. That's what this reminds me of. For real, that's what it reminds me of. And and maybe a little bit tinge of like the Hunger Games or like a battle royale type thing, because you do have that competitive aspect there where you're trying to be the last man standing, or last woman standing. And so this was an extremely great read. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars just because it wasn't quite 5, but it was a great and entertaining read. So that was Nerve by Jeanne Ryan. The next book that I had read was called Unsolved Child Murders by Emily G. Thompson. This one, again, is very similar to In the Name of the Children. It's also very similar to the one I read last year. And it was... it talks about 18 unsolved cases, and these were some really, guys, these were some really messed up stories. Again, if this is not, I'm gonna give this disclaimer for In the Name of the Children, Death of an Altar Boy, and this book, Unsolved Child Murders. I'm telling you right now, if you, and let me tell you something, okay? I know a lot of people don't have the stomach for this, but we must protect the children at all costs, and so you must get educated. In my personal opinion, it's your duty as an adult to understand the evil, wicked world that we're living in. That's my opinion. But if you seriously cannot handle this, do not read these particular 3 that I just named, because it is extremely disturbing. If you're a parent especially, this might make you lose sleep, and it's unimaginable, guys, the cases that I listened to in all these various different books. It's actually crazy to think about how sick the human mind is when left unchecked, and it's quite honestly terrifying. Some of these cases, especially the ones in which the parents are involved, that makes it especially disturbing. But I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because it was, again, extremely well written, and a lot of the cases I'd never heard of before, so it shed light onto cases that really do need some attention. So that was that. The next one I had read was extremely short. It was called Till Murder Do Us Part by Brian Burrow. Let me tell you, this was pretty mediocre. I'm not gonna lie. And the reason why I say it was pretty mediocre is because, I'm actually gonna change this. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm actually gonna change it to 3 because this was extremely mediocre. And let me tell you why. This was extremely mediocre because for anyone that knows about this particular case, this is the Hall Mills case, the pastor and the affair with the married woman in New Brunswick. They'd gotten found on Lover's Lane, which was I believe on what was the road? Anyway, it was on the border between New Brunswick and Franklin. This book was extremely mediocre. It was extremely mediocre because anybody that has listened to any podcast, this basically had the same information. There was not any, and to be quite honest with you, there's really not much to work with this case because it is such an old case and there's really not much more that you could, but I'm telling you, you might as well just watch Bailey Sarian's video on this because that's how much content, the extra content that he put in here. It was literally, you might as well been listening to Bailey Sarian because it's literally the same thing, guys. So mediocre. I could honestly give it 2 stars, but I'm trying to be nice here, and I usually end up rating higher, but it was totally mediocre, guys, and I wasn't impressed at all. No new information, nothing new that I really learned. Maybe a tidbit of information, maybe. But guys, you're better off just listening to Bailey Sarian talk about this case. And last but not least, the book that I have, the last book that I read in February was called Resurrection America by Jafe Gunhus. This is a standalone novel. This is also not really well known or talked about a lot. It was an extra borrow for the month of February in Hoopla. And so I decided to give it a listen. And it's basically this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of dystopian novel in which America has been severely what's the name? What's the word for it? Damaged, I guess. Let's just say damaged from the endless wars going on. This was written before we pulled out of Afghanistan. And it's just an interesting take on what could have happened if we were still there. Well, basically the thing is we just pull out of one war to get into another, but that's a totally different subject. That's a totally different subject. But anyway, this book is about basically an America in which they're not really the world power anymore. They're not a domineering force as they once were. Kind of what we're going through now. And that's why this was really interesting to me, because here's what the plot was. So it's about this guy, and I believe he's an ex-Marine. Yeah, he's an ex-Marine. And his name is Rick. Funny, because it's kind of like Rick Grimes, but anyway. So he's an ex-Marine, and his name is Rick. And his wife not his wife, his significant other, in which he wanted to marry, he split. And so he's with this other woman, and is kind of like a stepfather to her son now. And I believe he's the sheriff, and the mayor and him are very close, and basically they're having this town fair. It's a small town, kind of, it was used to be a mining town, and they shut the mines down, and they were also doing experiments in the mines or whatever, and then that had gotten shut down. And so basically it's a small town that is plagued by basically lack of jobs, lack of money, lack of resources, and the mayor and him try and coordinate this fair every year. They want to make it huge. They want to make it a big deal. And it is close to that date, and he comes across some unsettling details, and which makes him question the safety of his town and the safety of the people that he's protecting. And it was a really nice read. Really nice read. So that's the plot, and I don't really want to give too much away. Let's just say, okay, somebody basically comes rolling into town, and he basically has little to no information on who this person is, who this group of people is, but decides to let them basically hang out there for the what he thought was the betterment of his community, his town. He thought, I can deal with this later. We just need to get this fair done. And the fair goes basically terribly wrong, and this particular group rolls in again and basically alarms the public about a certain something. And I just think that this book is actually crazy, because it's almost exactly what's going on now. And like I said, it's not really a famous book. I'd never heard of this book before, but I just, any post-apocalyptic or dystopian novels, guys, I'm open to reading. Literally, I'll read any of them. I don't care how famous they are. It's kind of like, that's just how I am with that genre. But this was extremely interesting, and, the town's called Resurrection, Colorado. And it's basically a tale of how this whole small town unravels in such a short time. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, I'd never heard of this author before, and I've never heard of this book before, but it was not a disappointing read, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So that's that. Next month, we will be doing a wrap-up, most likely, of what I read in March, which is shaping up to be mostly nonfiction. I think it's going to be all nonfiction next month, guys. With how my loose TBR is looking, because I don't have a set TBR. I know a lot of people do their TBR shelves and stuff on Goodreads, and they have like in-person TBR and stuff. I just have certain books that I want to get to, and certain titles that interest me or whatever, that I want to get to. I would say the kind of loose TBR I have is what's what I favorited on Hoopla, and the majority of what I want to get to, like, I don't want to commit to a trilogy yet. Like, I don't want to commit, so that's why I've been reading mostly non-fictions, or even standalone thrillers, or dystopians. There is definitely so much in when I didn't. Okay, so I've been using Hoopla now for about a year and a half now. About a year and a half, I believe. And sometimes, like, when looking at the audiobook section, I forget that there's different genres. Like, sometimes I just get caught up in, like, the recommendeds and favorites that I don't realize there's other titles and genres out there, not just the ones that everyone's reading. Because let's be real, a lot of the ones that everyone's reading, like that everyone is reading, is like kind of overrated. A lot of the titles that people have been recommending are kind of overrated. And the real gems are when you start taking a look at what they have. Well, there are so many true stories, nonfiction stories that I'm so interested in that I'll just name a few of them off to you. The one I was telling you guys about with Lori Vallow, the story on it, is called The Doomsday Mother. There's one about Prohibition that looks interesting. It's called The War on Alcohol. This one is about Roanoke, is literally just called Roanoke. Illicit looks interesting. I couldn't believe they had Behold a Pale Horse on here. I mean, they say it's unabridged, but it's only like 2 hours long. It's like 3 hours long, which is crazy because I have the book. Like, I have the physical copy, and it's way thick. Like, I don't think that that's true. I mean, it could be, but it's kind of weird to me that they have that here. China's Civilian Army looks interesting. Strange Medicine, that's probably going to be on my... That kind of would remind me of, like, Radium Girls a little bit. And, that's probably going to be one of the first ones that I'll, put on and borrow. Broad Strokes, about women in the, art field is going to be interesting. There's just so many, guys, like so many true stories that I'd like to educate myself on. And because what I find is reading true stories and like history is a good gauge usually on getting to understand what's going on currently. And a lot of the times you can draw comparisons from certain stories in order to make a point. And I mean, guys, let me tell you something. Hoopla may be free through certain libraries, but this has got to be like the best, like one of the, like probably the best. I actually, guys, no lie, when I was on Audible, I was using Audible and Hoopla for like 3 months because Panera had given me the free trial, right? And when I was on Audible, right, I gotta be real, Hoopla actually has more famous and new titles on it than Audible does. And that's 100% shade. I'm throwing shade, major shade right now. How is it that Hoopla, I don't know how much these libraries are paying for their subscription to it every year, but guys, it is so much better of a platform than Audible is. Audible has these books on there too, but you have to pay for them. Hoopla, if you have it, if your local library has this, make sure to check it out. And I'll tell you another thing that, and this is kind of off topic from books, kind of, but I'm going to mention it because it's really impressive, guys. I mean, this is really impressive to me. Oh, that's interesting. A minute. Okay, so I'm going to tell you another thing that is literally like my obsession right now, that the library offers. And certain ones do, certain ones don't. Canopy, guys. Oh my gosh. This has got to be like one of the best streaming platforms. You get $7 a month, which is fine with me. You get $7 a month, and they have like literally everything. They have documentaries. Like, let me tell you what's on my list that I'm really looking forward to watching. On this platform, I had watched, I've watched 4 movies on this platform well, actually, no, it's 5. I've watched 5 movies on this platform so far. It might be more than 5. I could be wrong. But anyway, I've watched Her on here, Dismissed on here, Into the Forest on here, Silo, and New Order. And they have got such a selection, and Coherence. Okay. But, so many movies are on here, guys. I mean, these are like legit titles. Ava's on here. There's a lot of interesting documentaries and biopics that I'm so, interested in. A lot of the movies that I've seen before are on here. Equals is on here. The Rover is on here, which, by the way, The Rover sucks, guys. The Rover sucks. That's a waste of 2 hours. What else do we have here? Inheritance is on here. Like, guys, these are some really good titles. High Life is on here. That's another Robert Pattinson movie, which that's the really messed up one that I was telling you guys about on my podcast. There are so many. Like, Every Breath You Take is on here. Guys, these are some... I, Tanya's on here. These are legit titles that they have. And you get $7 a month. And this is like... Guys, this is like great. They have a Good Time on here. Another Robert Pattinson that was Twisted. That I was talking about on my podcast. These are just so interesting. Now, let me tell you what ones I'm going to be watching next, okay? I want to finish Donnie Darko. It was on Tubi at some point, and I had never finished it. So I would like to finish that. I really am more interested in these documentaries, guys, and these these documentaries on specifically artists. They have a whole, like, they have an art section, they have an entertainment section. Like, guys, if you're an artist, you should really check this out because they have so many interesting documentaries on here. Or even if you're into cooking or whatever, and they have like interesting like films on authors and stuff too. Like, this is like such a good service. The ones that I'm looking at watching is, what's it called? Waco, The Rules of Engagement. I'm also, this Banksy documentary looks interesting. I had read the Andy Warhol memoir years ago, and this one, Factory Girl or whatever, looks interesting. There's just so many stuff on history. They have a lot. What I noticed is they have a lot of stuff that you would usually see on TV, like from the History Channel on here. Which, if you're into those, they have a lot of those for you on here. So, this is like the best movie platform that like the library offers. So, that's great, and I wanted to like put you guys onto that because it's great. It's called Canopy, and it's wonderful. It's basically like I said, you get $7 a month, but it's basically like Tubi and Peacock without the ads. That's another thing that I failed to mention. There are no ads when you watch these. So anyway, wanted to fill you in on what I've been reading, what I've been watching, what I've been put on to, and yeah. So hopefully we'll do this again next month, and these are fun, and I hope you guys are able to find some interesting reading material through me doing this. So, that's all. And, till next time, bye, I guess.